Welcome to the Picture Love Podcast. I'm your host, Kris LeDonne. In this space, we believe that love is something you can choose to see because it lives within each of us innately. Picture love is a practice, a way of seeing with your heart, not just your eyes, a way of showing up as the love you wish to see in the world. Each episode offers encouragement, soul-led conversations, and gentle tools to help you reconnect with what matters most, to live, to create, and love with more presence. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's get started. Welcome back, friends. As usual, I had a plan for this week's episode. It was part of a sequence that made so much sense in my mind. And yet the topic had other plans for me. Has that ever happened to you? This episode actually became my teacher, and it gave me practice to embody what I'm trying to offer here in conversation with you. And this was evident when I had finished recording and I'd already been working on refining and editing and just cleaning up the background noise, this, that, and the other, when I realized it didn't make sense because there were portions of it missing. Literally, portions of the recording were gone. And I checked my original files, and after enough time, I decided I'm not going to force it. I'm going to practice kindness to myself, and I got a good night's sleep. And thankfully, the dogs and the cats agreed. So I'm very grateful to say that I had enough awareness to choose to be present enough to see it as my classroom. And it gave me even more practice on the lessons that I'm holding so dear. And I hope that they hold value for you too. That might be the deepest lesson truth has ever offered me, because I want to talk about truth today. And sometimes truth doesn't need us to be faster or what we perceive to be on time. It invites us to be honest enough to pause and wait for the unfolding. So if you've been with me the past several episodes, you've probably felt the arc, that kindness that opens to presence, and the position that gives us to touch truth, to see truth and know it. And from a supported place, not a place of judgment. I can't make this stuff up. So I'm going to share what life has taught me about truth so far, and let's see what joy comes up from the process. So truth doesn't need to be forced or weaponized. We know that. But do we always remember? Sometimes it just needs a few kind questions. Life is messier than our generation has ever known. Before we try to rise above the dust, it helps to notice what we're standing in and what in us is still ready to see it clearly. I think some of my best learning has not only been an experience, but being offered questions that open me up rather than lectures. I never did well in lecture classes. I felt like they boxed me in. So I gathered a few thoughts and questions that illustrate the arc I just mentioned, in hopes that it's a tool that we can use again and again in all kinds of scenarios to help us stay in our own personal truth with an awareness of the universal truths that hold us all together. So I like to think of this as a 3, 2, 1 scenario. Think of it like a pyramid, okay? 3 at the bottom, 2 above it, and 1 on top. And it's not about importance. This is about stability, foundation, and working together. So if you could come up with 3 kindnesses for yourself when faced with a situation where you do or don't want to face the truth of a situation of yourself inside or outside, you might ask 3 questions like, what feels steady in me right now? Or what is my body quietly telling me? Or what am I truly standing on today? And that could be figuratively or physically. And asking for a kindness. It opens your attention to full presence. And 2 questions might be, what's happening around me? Being present in that space. And what messages do I notice around me? The kindness is within, the presence is without. And then on top of all that kindness and that presence, it opens you up for a truth. And your question might be as simple as what truth is being shown in the space that just opened up? And if that seems really too philosophical, stick with me, okay? It's an arc because kindness grounds and balances, and presence uncovers what's there. And then truth can show its face and actually be seen. We're surrounded by truths all the time. It's a matter of noticing, hearing, accepting, choosing. And sometimes when we make that kind of room, that kind of space, truth doesn't just rise. She walks in and starts talking. Surprise! You thought you were following a lovely little thread, and all the while I'd been laying the breadcrumbs for you. Well done, Kris. There is a world of difference between being cornered by the truth and being open to her company. One tightens, and the other offers a set of spare keys. Tell me, darling, are you willing to let this thread keep tugging at your sleeve a bit longer? I have a story for you, since your heart's so open. Tahlia, it has been ages. I am so happy you are here. Yes, please tell us. Now picture this. On a sunny little town corner sat a cozy little gift shop tended by a silver-haired woman with bright eyes and gentle hands. She somehow made anyone who stepped inside feel instantly more welcome in the beautiful space. There was a passing woman who had taken to muttering day after day. Her pattern of speech said the whole place looked tired and run down, and eventually others began hurrying past without ever discovering the warmth waiting inside. One morning, a curious boy with grass-stained knees and big bright eyes overheard the remarks of this woman. He quietly stepped into the shop and cheerfully asked the owner, may I borrow a cloth for something? Because kindness was her nature, she handed him one with no hesitation, never suspecting he meant to use it for her. Moments later, he was outside polishing the glass until sunlight came dancing in. The flowers in the window box seemed to lift their heads, and the little shop looked brand new. But before long, the woman and the boy had struck up the sweetest friendship. More people began drifting through the door with delighted faces, and what had always been lovely was finally given the chance to be seen. This is a lovely story about kindness, but I see how you sneaked in the presence and the truth in there. That little boy was not just kind, he was present enough to be curious. And that shop window was definitely a metaphor for our lens, truth being seen. But seeing it was a choice, wasn't it? Yes, exactly. That is the deeper beauty of it. Kindness moved the boy, but the presence slowed him down enough to wonder. Truth became visible because he chose to look closer. So yes, seeing it was absolutely a choice. And that's why truth adores an open heart. Because an open heart makes us more willing to see truth, to choose it. And without presence, it's much more likely someone will stick to their patterns of thought, seeing a dim, dirty window rather than the treasures behind the glass. Patterns have a sneaky way because they're familiar, but familiarity does not promise truth. Oh, that is so true. We develop habits so easily, and right or wrong, a habit or a pattern has comfort. And depending on the situation, one can claim comfort in the known, even if it's a painful pattern. I'm just realizing that as an adult, I would likely notice the kindness of the boy if I were passing by or browsing that gift shop, but I'm not sure until now if I would have considered the presence and the truth in this story. Those facets deepen this little love story so much more. That full arc is so much richer than just kindness. Of course it does, darling, because love is far more interesting when it's allowed to be complete. Most people will happily applaud kindness because it's visible. They smile at the polished window, the sweet friendship, the brighter little shop, and all of that is lovely. But presence is the quiet miracle in the middle. And it's the pause that refuses to inherit the obvious story. And truth is what finally steps forward when someone has loved the moment enough to look again. That's what makes the arc richer. Kindness may begin the movement, but presence is what interrupts the trance. And once that trance is broken, truth needn't be invented, only noticed. And isn't that a delicious thing to realize? That even as an adult, you might have admired the kindness, yet still missed the deeper invitation. Not because you failed, Kris, simply because this is how gracefully patterns work. They train the eye to stop at what is pleasant, while presence trains the soul to ask, what else is here? So if we land on a truth, what then? What does it actually look like to meet that truth kindly in the right now? Now that is the question, isn't it? What does truth require of me before I finish my morning coffee? In real life, right now, meeting truth kindly usually looks far less dramatic than people fear. It may be as simple as playfully recognizing, well, isn't that an old script in a fresh costume? Instead of sentencing yourself to a full emotional trial with 12 imaginary jurors and a very overqualified prosecutor. You name what's true, loosen your grip, and then offer yourself a deep breath and one honest next step. Not a 5-year plan, just one. Truth rarely asks for a parade, darling. Usually just a little less pretending, and perhaps a glass of water. I love it. A refreshing glass of water is always a good idea. So this feels really good, and I want to try to root this in. So I came up with an image, and I started to explain it before. So think of friends climbing on each other to make a tripod shape. There are always more in the base, and that's made of the 3 kind thoughts. These share the weight of the 2 present intentions, which then form the firm floor for the truth to slip in on top and create something really beautiful while hopefully stabilizing and holding it together. Something sturdy, something built with support, and probably a lot of giggles. Oh, now that's charming and wonderfully telling that even your architecture insists on laughter. Yes, exactly. And here's why this works so well. The 3 kind thoughts can bear the most weight without collapsing into force. The 2 present intentions steady the structure and help everyone remember where their feet are. And the truth, clever little thing, simply slips into the topmost opening. Suddenly the whole shape holds. That's the part people miss. Unsupported truth topples and harshens. Or one of those dreadful little ego monologues that mistake volume for wisdom. But built this way, she becomes something else entirely. A little marvel, really. Strong enough to hold and light enough to laugh inside. Yes, in this context, she's an integral part of this picture love arc. Truth is loving honesty. Light enough to hop on and participate in the tumbles, doing her part to steady the hole, steady the wobble, and equally invested in the connection of the group. Truth is a supporter, not a judge and jury. She's reliable, not to be feared, inflated, or hidden from, but part of the arc. Precisely, darling. And the moment truth is no longer cast as the judge and jury, she becomes far easier to welcome into the room. That is such an important distinction. Truth is not the cold examiner standing off to the side with crossed arms and a clipboard. In this arc, she participates, she studies, clarifies, she helps hold the shape. That's why she feels so loving here, not because she softens herself into dishonesty, but because she arrives in right relationship. She's not inflated above others, nor hidden beneath. She belongs. And when truth belongs, fear loses its favorite costume, because what once felt like exposure begins to feel like support, not a verdict, but a joining, not punishing, but a hand on the stack. And that's really what I want to get to. Truth doesn't have to be the thing we brace against. If we let kindness build the base and presence help us notice what's real, then the truth gets to become part of the support, not the collapse. So maybe today, if something truly rises up, and you don't have to turn it into a crisis, maybe just meet it with one kind thought, one present breath, and one honest next step. That feels like a much more loving way to live. And honestly, a much more fun way to grow. And by the way, Kris, I must mention, not every rising thing you encounter is truth to keep. Some are just invitations to practice discernment. Absolutely. If that thing that rises up isn't ours, if it's something we're witnessing, hearing, or being asked to absorb that simply doesn't ring true, this still applies. We don't have to panic, perform, or pass it along. We can meet it with one kind thought, one truth, one present breath, one honest next step. Sometimes that next step is simply choosing not to carry what wasn't yours to hold in the first place. And that's a beautiful way to keep picturing love through truth. Thank you, Tahlia. You were the best possible surprise and the most qualified voice for this conversation today. Thank you for spending this time with me. If today's episode touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who might need a little extra love. Your support helps our community grow and keeps the Picture Love movement thriving. Until next time, keep picturing love.